Did you press all the right things? Oh, yeah, I can hear you. You pressed them. Yay! Well, that's very exciting. And how are you today? Oh, it's actually it wasn't, but now it's almost looking like a hurricane outside. So thanks for that. Mm, mhm. Mhm. Hi from Texas. Hi, CL from Texas. I bet Texas. I wonder, is Texas like really hot? Oh, Janet's saying she cannot hear you. I could hear you.
How about now? I missed
Did you?
one.
I was gonna say, did you turn on me and not you?
No, so I have to turn myself on in 3 different places, and I turned on all of the ones, but the one that actually broadcast out this my microphone. So
I really am enjoying like the eagle wing extension of the bun
yeah.
on your head.
So while we were waiting, I was like, "Do you not see my head looks like it has wings?" Caw,
Yeah.
caw.
It's fancy. It's fancy. Well, y'all, I'm having a sad day. Aside from the fact that it is really hot in this room, and this room does not have any AC yet, and that was a mistake. But it's our last installment.
I know, and I didn't do my reading until this morning. And I was like, oh, I only have the one chapter, so it was pretty easy. But yeah.
You know, I think you need to stop telling us when you did your reading in the last minute, because I think that's your standard, and start telling us when you did it like ahead of time.
Sometimes I do.
I know, but like
It's been a while, but sometimes I do.
yeah, usually you're telling us that you did it at like the
Hey,
last
I
minute,
did the reading.
so.
That's all that matters.
Yes, I'm not the one complaining in the fact that you're reading at the last minute. You're just always telling on yourself.
It's okay. I don't mind telling on myself for that.
But to be fair, you've already read this book.
Yeah, this is true. But it was a long time ago. It's been a couple years ago.
Because I bought it a long time ago. This book is not that old.
Well, that's the thing. I bought it right after it was published. I want to say like Quilt Folk was one of the, like, they did a new book thing. They often do that. And I saw it and I was like, oh, this is very interesting. And I bought it. I hadn't, I didn't really know a whole lot about it. I didn't know Pam at the time. And so, yeah, it was fortuitous.
Oh, and Carlotta,
Hey, Carlotta.
that's you. You're CL. You're just like tag teaming us on 2 devices tonight. Hey,
100. Oh, honey. Whoa.
Yeah, that's a bit much.
Yes, I'm sorry for that. I know Texas.
I would probably burst into flames.
I know. Let's see. It's been a while since I've been to Texas. I had a job there one time. I was freelancing and I was down there in September. The job, again, I was a consultant. I was freelancing. The job just went to hell, and the car I had rented, I think they should not be allowed to rent black cars in Texas, but it was a black car with a black interior. And yeah, I was like, it was September and I was like, back home.
Was it leather?
No, it was fabric, but nonetheless, it was like you opened the door and it was like this blast of heat coming out of it. Oh, it was awful. But I have to say, and gosh, this will date it. This will tell you how long ago it was. Talladega Nights was in the movies. I was in the theaters. And so because this job just went downhill, I was like, well, I got to take a flight home sooner than I planned. So I have a day to kill. So I guess I'm going to go watch this movie. And it raised my spirits because it was stupid and ridiculous.
Speaking of Texas too, and the heat there and the reasons why I could never live there, a friend of mine that lives in Texas, she just posted on social media a little while ago that for the first time in like the 20 years, I guess, that she's been there, whatever, she's from Maine, she found a tarantula in her house the size of a teacup saucer.
Oh, okay. So I would burn my house down.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm like, well, it's time to burn the house down and go back to me. Like,
oh my gosh. Yeah. So y'all who live in these states that have, I feel like it's like the perimeter. So, like the lower perimeter has all the lizards and the weird bugs and things. Of course, I live in the mid-Atlantic. We have weird bugs and things, but nothing like
North Carolina. When I was in North Carolina, there was a lot of poisonous snakes in North Carolina. I made the mistake of going to like a, just one of those like state museum things, and I'm like, wow. And I had like woods and like this little creek in my backyard, and I was like, oh great, I'm probably like prime breeding area.
Well, yeah, that's one of the ways my father greets me, because he lives in North Carolina, and I stayed with him recently, and he said, yeah, watch where you step. I killed a copperhead last week. Like, good to see you too. So yeah. Carlotta says she has scorpions. Another animal I'd rather not encounter outside of a zoo.
Yeah, like let's change the vibe a little bit.
Yeah. We have a calendar to look at, don't we?
We do have a calendar, and then we have an announcement. So y'all, it's like the end of May.
I don't know how this now. I know we like beat the dead horse of where does the time go, but I don't know where May went. May was like all of a sudden I blinked and suddenly it's the end of May.
Yeah, and May wasn't even as busy as April was.
I know.
So
it's crazy.
Yeah, so we're introducing our June calendar here because next week is our interview with Pam at 7 p.m. and that is very exciting. And then after that, for us at least, we're gonna have 2 Tuesdays in a row of recorded content because I am away this Tuesday and this week, and then Steph is away the Tuesday and this week. Don't you worry though, we always have exciting things that are the stuff that ends up being recorded content. So make sure you're watching those. And then we're gonna have a live freebie here, and then we hit July and we're gonna start a new book. But I'll show you that in a second. But then we also made sure that we put in some stitching glitches in here so that you don't feel like we just can't be found for a couple of weeks straight. And that's
you don't want a whole month to go by and not hear about chicken sandwiches.
Well, and on the 14th here, I will be getting back from a quilt retreat in Waterville Valley, New Hampshire. So
Yeah, that'll be
I
fun
will
to
have
hear
things to
about.
talk about, including the food.
Oh.
Well,
So we
you
know
always have to
it's
talk.
wait, what sort of word rhymes with stitch that means to eat? I don't know, is there one? Maybe in some other language. I don't know. We cuz that's really we don't do much stitching. We generally talk about food.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to rhyme. I guess it could be a stitch and munch,
Stitch
but
and
we're not
munch.
actually eating.
We only talk about the food. All
Yeah,
right.
but anywho, so then in July there, hello. Oh my God, it doesn't want to. Hold on, I only hit that one screen. Hold, please. Loading. This is our next book. We're gonna stay in New England and we're gonna read Maine Quilts by our friend Laureen LaBar. And the reason for reading this book, especially at the time that we're reading it, is this year's American Quilt Study Group seminar is in Portland, Maine. And there's apparently a number of these quilts that we're going to see in person. So I'm not going to lie to you. One of the reasons to do this book is because we're hoping to entice you to come to American Quilt Study Group seminar in Portland. Because
Yeah.
like we're gonna be there and stuff. So wouldn't
Yeah.
you want to nerd out and see these quilts like with us? And then Steph just put into the chat there our Amazon affiliate link for Maine Quilts. Lori doesn't sell the book herself. And there will hopefully be an A Books one as well. I'm just having some trouble with the affiliate thing because they changed some stuff. So
But
that's
you'll
what's
put well
going
you will
on.
put that out there in our group
Yeah,
and
so
stuff.
it'll end up in the description of this video. It'll end up in the description of all the videos in June, and then I'll put it out onto social media on our Facebook and our Instagram.
So yes, please buy our ulterior motive book that we want to read. But
Yeah, this will
we've
actually be
talked
the
to yeah, we talked to Lori and she's really excited and she's looking forward to doing the author interview with us, etc. So
and this will be the first state book we read, won't it?
I think so. I'm doing my quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. Sorry guys if I'm gonna like drink like crazy. It's just it's hot in here. So yeah. So that's gonna be our next one. Oh my God. And also like we're doing really good, like keeping on track here with doing like author interviews. No one has said no to us that we've asked so far. So
Yeah.
that's quite a streak. Yes, Janet, we
Yeah,
get
we do.
we get a few pennies
A few
every time you
shekels.
guys every time you guys buy a book from either when we do the Amazon affiliate links or the Abe book affiliate links. That's why we have them.
Yeah.
Of course, you are not obligated to use them. If you have an independent bookseller near you, or your girlfriend gives you the book, like don't feel obligated, but it does help us out. So without further ado,
Can I show off
oh,
the
you
thing
want to
I
show your
started
thing? Show
making
your
today?
thing.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I don't know if anybody here caught my stream yesterday. But I kind of took the easy way out and I had a box of stuff that was like from old sewing baskets and things that I bought that I've like literally never gone through or sort of gone through, but not really. And at the very end, I pull out these two sandwich baggies with all of these little bits of fabric in it. And I'll just show you like a handful of them. Right? And I
And
was
they're all
like,
like 2-inch squares or something.
they are 2-inch squares. And just in my mind, because I usually see this kind of stuff and I'm like, oh, it's somebody cut this stuff up to make, a very ugly quilt, And then I was the end of the stream ends, and I'm sitting here at my desk, waiting for my little thing to finish. And I was looking at these and I was like, wait a minute. These are they all have a little, zigzaggy edge. And they're old, I mean, not like ancient, but like 1970s. And I start looking at them all, and then I realize like there's like they're garment fabrics, a lot of them, and then there's a whole bunch of really cool like sparkly stuff, and I was like, oh, this is not a very ugly quilt somebody was trying to make. These are fabric samples. So I have started making my own fabric sample book. This, I only got a few pages, but this is the sparkly fabrics page, which they're not looking very sparkly, but they are. I don't know what company these are from, but this, I swear these stacks look like somebody went through and like went, I'm going to take one of every single like sample. And so I don't know if it's like a distributor, if it's some sort of manufacturer. They're all definitely synthetics. I checked all of them. Like, there's one swatch that I think is not synthetic. It looks like it's cotton. All the rest are synthetic. So it's got to be 1970s, but I think these are kind of high-end fabrics. And so I don't know if this is like I don't know, like, what a store could order or what it is. So anyway, if anybody has any ideas.
It's going to help you out when the polyester quilt craze
yeah.
in the 70s.
Well,
I started crazy on the market.
Yeah, I started collecting those trade journals. I think it's American Fabrics. I think it's a trade journal. I started collecting the ones specifically from the 70s because they do have swatches of double knit fabric in them. Oh. Yeah, and it's a trade magazine, so it's not something that was really well circulated. I lost out on a bunch of them at the silent auction. I think it was when we were in Louisville for seminar.
Oh, is that what those? Oh.
Yes, I was like, ah. I got one chunk of them and I lost the other chunk of them. So anyway, I was really excited about that, and I know this has nothing to do with quilting, obviously, but I am an absolute sucker for fabrics, and I realized that this is the other end of the spectrum from our dress diary fabrics, because those were beautiful cottons and silks and things. But I still think, this is like a moment in time of these fabrics, and I'm 90% certain they're from the 70s.
Did you happen to notice as well that the up-and-coming Dana Auctions Quilt and Textile auction has a bunch of swatches in it too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I try not to look, but then somehow I added
you get
myself.
Text messages from
yes,
them?
Somehow I said, yes, it's okay, Dana, you can text me, and now I get those texts, and I'm like, no, Dana, don't tell me! So, all right. Are we ready to go?
I think we are ready to go. So, if y'all remember, we stopped at the end of chapter 6 because we were so over time already, because there were just too many amazing things to look at. So, we have to start with 7. We have 7 and 8. We're not going to go through 9 live here because it's a pattern chapter. So this is where we left off here in the very beginning of 7 with fundraising and variety quilts. And I will say that one of the notes that I had made is right in the beginning here on page 134, where it talks about Pam wrote, the styles seen in the 20th century quilt as you go mirrors the general fads of each period. And she said several potholder fundraising quilts made between 1890 and 1930 feature redwork embroidery, which we've seen a lot of redwork embroidery quilts, hundreds of signatures, and blocks bound in red cotton.
So the thing that really stood out to me about this, yes, I think that fundraising quilts, particularly the early part of, a little bit into the 20th century, lots of fundraising quilts, church groups and these ladies, auxiliary, ladies aid, whatever. But what I thought was so fascinating was the last paragraph on that page where she says, she's talking about West Concord. The town's population reached its peak in 1880 with 1,660 residents, so nearly half of them participated in the fundraiser. That is wild to me. Obviously, we're talking about the numbers here. Like with a small number like that, it's conceivable. But I just think about, like, I live in a pretty small community, outside of a much bigger area. But I'm like, even to get Like even to get my neighbors to participate in something is like a super challenge. I mean, getting half of this town to participate
Yeah.
in this fundraiser is wild.
I mean, when you think about just I mean, just think about the sheer difference from now about people like ringing your doorbell.
Mm-hmm.
Not only just ringing your doorbell, but like asking something of you. The only
Mm-hmm.
difference I guess part of that would make is that like most of these people probably knew each other, and just for
Sure.
reference too, like I know there's a different quilt on the screen, but we're talking about page
134.
34, which has a red work
Mm-hmm.
signature quilt on it. Um so yeah, I think like it is an enormous feat to get half the town, but I'm also thinking like you probably know half the town
Yeah,
in
I mean,
some, in
yeah.
some real capacity, not even just like, oh yeah, that's that lady that lives at the end of some street. Like
Yeah. Well,
it's so
certainly.
wild that
Yeah. They went to church together. Yeah. I mean,
well, not just that. Think of how normal it used to be to just like spend the night at everyone's house.
mm-hmm.
Like
Now I'm like, if you want to come into my house, it's going to be over my cold dead body because you're not staying here. Like, what are you talking
yeah.
about? Um, they must have set up booths at the church and county fair events, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
Um, I mean, and that's that's a really good thought that Carlotta poses there is like, what was the process for getting these signatures? I think in this case, let's see, is this the same one that we're talking about here, Concord? No, I don't think. I think what she's talking about Concord is. Now I'm confused. The redwork quilt that she's showing on page 134, that's New Hampshire. In any event, I'm very curious to know what the process looked like. I mean, does everybody like expect you to be coming? I guess that's the question. Do all your friends and family know you're going to be coming with your quilt blocks and your hand out? Give me the money. you know, I know sometimes the quilts are raffled, and that's the fun. That's the form of the funds, or it's both. There's the raffling and the names on it, but I think. So that's an interesting question to me is like, what does that process look like? Are you hiding from people? Are you ducking people? Or are you excited to get your name on the quilt? But the other thing is like, in terms of sometimes people just don't show up in any kind of history when you look for them. And this especially is a time period when you're not necessarily going to find birth certificates. A lot of places didn't do marriage certificates outside of the church records. So this quilt, one of these quilts might be the only thing that somebody's name is on, and it's one of those like, I was here, and I don't mean to get like super deep or anything, but I mean, that is kind
You're
of the way some
wondering,
of
are
this
you
stuff
wondering
is.
if there was ever a sense of that?
Well, yeah, a little bit. But I mean, to me, these are even just two separate kind of trains of thought here of just like, wow, this might be the only place that this person's name appears in print outside of maybe a church record from when they
Well,
were
especially
born.
if it's a female.
Yes, exactly. And, I didn't look too close. I mean, you can kind of see some of the names here. And, that's another question. Are they appearing with their full names, the women? Anytime there's names on quilts, those are things that I'm always so fascinated by. Is this person's name written anywhere else? And is this person, the ones that make me very sad are the ones that are like Mrs. Edward Jones. Like, you're not even going to put your first name on a quilt,
You just gave me like the best idea. Oh my God. Hold on. I have to keep talking. I have to write a note to myself.
Okay. So yeah, and we've talked about these signature quilts a bunch of times over different books we've read. And I just go back to the fact they're so fascinating. You wouldn't see this today outside of like a guild getting together and doing this, and it's quite likely not going to have all of these names. It's going to be people that are close to the guild members.
That is an interesting point though. Because obviously we still have signature quilts, like it's still a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
when you think about them in I don't know, like the last, maybe the mid to last quarter of the 20th century and like into now, the number of signatures that tend to show up are so fewer.
Oh, sure. It's one per
Um,
block.
and not and big blocks. Like
Hmm.
when I think about like every signature quilt that I currently have in stock, I think all of them are, and it's probably because it's so much more insular as to who would be involved.
Hmm.
Whereas these old fundraising quilts, especially a lot of the red work, you'd be involving all kinds of people that have nothing to do with sewing, fabric.
Hmm.
They're just community members of some kind, or not. Like I'm thinking like you could even probably have scenarios where people pass through and pay for something.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I suppose, yeah, you could probably
Well,
have
I'm
people
thinking
that are
about in
visiting
like,
and they're like, oh, you're doing a fundraiser? Sure, here's some money. Put my name on that
yeah,
quilt.
like in those, especially in port towns,
Hmm.
like we were talking. Anyways, if we spend forever on one
I know.
thing, we'll never get through
Okay.
anything. We're still on like the
Skip, skip,
first
skip
page.
ahead.
Yeah.
Um,
So this quilt here goes into variety quilts, and this one is album quilt circa 18. I'm sorry, 1910, unknown maker, cotton, 77.5 by 66. The 42 10-inch blocks are a wonderful assortment of patterns popular in the late 19th century, and this is at the IQM in Nebraska, which is one reason why I showed it because they're really good about getting their stuff out there.
mhm.
And I feel like a lot of these we've seen in other blocks, but like it's interesting to me that they would take a tumbling block and turn it sideways like this.
Yeah,
I
and
wonder if
I,
that was on purpose. The same with the
well,
house.
I feel like, I mean, it says this is an album quilt. I kind of wonder if this is also maybe kind of a presentation quilt because if you turn it, the schoolhouse too
Oh,
is on
hold
its
on.
side.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if it was supposed to be presented like that, like it's supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be viewed like that.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. I really like this block right here.
I like the one. It's well, now it's over on the right hand side in the center, the far right in the center. It looks like plaid. It's red, white, and blue, as are all of these blocks.
I was gonna say, like, what? This one right here?
Yes. Yeah. Janet said
Like it's red.
nowadays
Look for the red, white, and blue.
they're all red, white, and blue. Janet said nowadays towns sell engraved bricks for patio
That's
somewhere.
true.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Actually, where were we just where we saw that?
The
At the
Schwenkfelder has them.
Schwenkfelder. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And when you think about it, it really is the same kind of concept because the way that you put a brick walkway or whatever, a building, whatever, together is just
Mm-hmm.
similar to a quilt.
Yep.
What would we do without our friends?
Um.
Me, hold on. Let me move forward here. Okay, so moving forward is
The sunshine circle quilt is just it's got to be those pinks and then like that kind of bright green and that orange and
well for
sherbety
you
color.
it's the pinks.
Well, no, but I'm just like this color combination. And it's kind of a weird quilt because like I mean you've got those and oh gosh, what is the pattern? Is it it's not is it shoe fly? The one that's the square in the middle and it's got the half square triangles on the corners.
This one.
That one, yeah. So there's like what, three of those? Two of them are beside each other. And the
Mm-hmm.
other, so like, however, whoever put this together and decided where the blocks are going to go, I think maybe they could have done a better job. I mean, I guess there's sort of a method to the madness, but kind of not. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I
Yeah, they
still like
balance
it.
the
I
pinks
really
pretty
like the
well,
colors.
but not the reds.
Yeah, yeah. I just it's kind of it's sort of a little bit, yeah, a little bit scattered how they put it together. I'm trying to think of just a nice way to say it, but I love the colors. I think it's a really fun quilt.
So this is the Sunshine Circle quilt, 1928. Members of the Sunshine Circle of the Presbyterian Church, Clinton, Indiana. Cotton 90 by 76. This quilt was made for Mrs. C.H. Vaughn and presented at the group's Christmas party in 1928. And it is collection of
Oh yeah, Pam
family.
owns this one.
Mm-hmm.
So the Sunshine Circle, I feel like that is another one of those, and I think I can't remember now if it was. Oh, Yeah. Okay, I reconnected.
Oh, is your connection okay now?
Yeah, I don't know if it's because of the weather or what, but
Hmm.
yeah, I think I'm back. So did I blip out and like, did you miss part of that?
Yeah, you froze looking like you were looking for something. So
Ugh.
for a second I thought everything was normal. Sorry, we blipped for a second, guys.
So what I was saying is the Sunshine Circle is, I believe, I could be wrong. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is one of those like standard women's groups
Yeah,
in
it says
churches.
so in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
On 138, let's see, when I hold on. Is it 138? What am I looking at? Pam mentions that Laura Lane from the okay, so she writes here at the top of the second column on 138. Laura Lane, collections manager at New England Quilt Museum, was involved in her Presbyterian church when she was living in Pennsylvania. A brief interview with her yielded the knowledge that such circles are common in churches across the country, and a church may have many women's circles with various names. All are intended to connect women in the church through social and educational programs. So it's not the first time we've come across some kind of
Yeah, I mean, the
circle
point I was
group.
just trying to make, like, I think all of these churches have women's groups.
Hmm.
I think Sunshine Circle is maybe one that's common. Like, that particular church didn't come up with it. There are other Sunshine Circles.
Yes, there is some
Um,
other place in here I think where she makes. Oh, there is no good online source for a comprehensive definition of a sunshine circle class because the organization can vary from church to church and region to region.
gotcha. Yeah. So, what another thing on this is the picture in the bottom corner of page
Hold
138.
on. I think I
Do you
took
have a
it.
picture of it?
Well, I took a close up here because it's just wonderful and delightful. And it says in the middle here, Christmas 1928. But yes, I think I took, yeah.
Yeah, there she is. This poor woman. Like, would you not have beautified yourself some a little bit?
Faces are hard.
I know, but I was like, oh dang. She probably looked exactly like that. Poor lady.
And I mean, she made it herself. Like,
Exactly. I mean,
and also, like, a self portrait that's a profile is even
Mhm.
harder, in my opinion.
Well, and I think she did a really good job, but I'm just like, wow, she looks so homely in this. I would have like made my glamour shot. I would have stitched myself like looking great.
Maybe this was glamour, though.
Maybe.
You know?
One of the other things
Like
in here.
maybe the lines in her hair there, maybe that's meant to be like finger waves.
Maybe.
We are in the 20s.
Yeah, and that bobbed hair. I mean, maybe she was very proud of that. She had that short hair that was, up and coming sort of thing. I mean, I'm reading Carrie Hall's book, and all she talks about is how these women were showing off the napes of their necks and their ankles, and my God, the world was coming to an end. These trashy trollops. Um, But one other thing I wanted to point out on this page that I think is on a more serious note in terms of research. So the second column, the second paragraph, it starts off to discover where the quilt was made. I transcribed all the names onto an Excel spreadsheet and then started my research with Mrs. C.H. Vaughn. This is like just a quick little snapshot of how you start doing this kind of research. The first thing you do is you like map the quilt, you transcribe the quilt. And in this case, it would be easy because it's like you have one name per block. So you kind of like, you ABC across the top, 1, 2, 3 down the side. And so then A1 is the first, block in the corner. And so A1 belongs to maybe Mrs. C.H. Vaughn. And then you would do that. And this quilt is not that big, so you could do it pretty quickly. Although it looks like, I think there's a couple in the middle that look like they have more than one name. So then you have the multiple names per block. Anyway, but that's just one method of doing this research. And I know it seems probably pretty obvious, like, make an Excel spreadsheet, but I think sometimes people don't know how to get started with this, if they want to research. So that's the best way is document it and then just start with the first name.
I think it definitely feels daunting too if you have a quilt where like these names are nice like in thick and dark and it's like black and embroidery over them, but if you
Mm.
have one that's really like stylized scripted handwriting and maybe the ink is a little faded or it's run, or
Yeah.
it's not easily discernible. Like you've seen us sit here and kind of argue over what the name is, because some of the letters and also the way people write in a cursive scripted handwriting, there is also like a liberty of like individualism that
There
happens
is.
in the
Yeah.
letters.
Hmm.
I definitely do that with cursive. Like I don't write B's like you're supposed to write a cursive B. I write it like differently. So you can that can be daunting too when you're just
It
like, oh,
can,
what does
yeah.
it say?
I do know one thing that somebody had suggested to me as far as, and this is not just with, with quilts, but also, any kind of like documents, is, if you kind of know the era, then you can find out what the common like script being taught in school was, and then you could kind of reverse engineer if you can find an alphabet of that script and see like what does the Q look like, or what does the
Hmm.
capital F look like. They may be like really swirly stuff, and it becomes a little bit easier to maybe tease out some of those big flowery weird looking letters.
Do some of those like genealogy sites or big search engines have, I'm just curious because obviously this is going to be a thing, but like have they harnessed like AI kind of stuff to
Yeah, they
translate
already
messages
had.
for you?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Library of Congress has been using something. They use human
Is it
transcribers.
easily accessible to like,
Um,
muggles?
Well, some of it is kind of some part of their internal process. I think Ancestry and Library of Congress, like I think they just have their internal like the algorithms were doing their thing. And you can tell when something has been human transcribed versus machine transcribed.
Hmm.
And that is something they've been using for a very long time. However, that said, with AI, the optical character recognition is getting better.
Hmm.
And so they have that kind of stuff also embedded into their sites. And so, it can read like horrible handwriting. I am grateful to whether it's human or machine, whoever has transcribed some of the censuses,
Hmm.
because some of those censuses are just impossible to read. And yeah, that and so the 1950 census was the last one that was released. Gosh, when was that? A couple years ago, I guess.
That seems really old to
2020.
be the
Oh,
last one
well, see, that's the
released.
thing. It has to be 70 years
Why?
because it does. That's just the rule in the United States. A
So,
census
like,
doesn't
on
get released for
average, most people have to be dead to release them on a census.
kind of, yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And it's funny because my dad was born in 1949 and his brother was in 47. So I found both of them on the 1950 census. But my mom
mhm.
wasn't born yet. She was born in 51. So I found her parents. I think they were newlyweds. I found them. So yeah, it's,
that's
yeah.
that's really obnoxious. So, like if you're doing research in the 1970s and you're trying to find people that are
You have to use
probably
some other
dead,
method. Yeah, you have to use some other method.
this is sus. Like,
This is standard. You guys, if you do any if you do any genealogical
I know, but
research,
it's
this is
almost like
standard.
they're saying like, well, we have to hide things so you can't
Well,
find people's
I think it is kind of a
affairs.
privacy thing. It is a privacy thing, I think, to some degree. Like if they were to release the census that would like the 2020 census, you would see a lot of information about people.
But I could literally Google and find the same information about people.
Yeah,
I
I know.
I could get your address and previous addresses like right now if I
Yes,
wanted.
yes, I agree with you, but I think that I don't want to digress on this topic much more, but you can have your name removed from all of those things. You can pay to have your name removed. You can not be on social media. You can keep yourself off the grid. However, if the census was public, which from 1950 and back it is, that's public information. So like there's no way to keep yourself off that. So I think that, I mean, and I think there's probably other reasons, but also the fact that it, maybe not nowadays, but at one point it did, like, it took them 10 years to look at all this stuff. Extrapolate all the data because it was all handwritten. But now I think it really does boil down to privacy concerns and yeah.
Yeah, I'm not buying it. I think it's just some old stinking rule that they're just like,
Well,
oh,
but you know, the thing is, as great as a census is, the other thing is, I mean, really today you don't need censuses. You've got, for the 60s, 70s, 80s, you had directories, you know, town and city directories. You have social media. It's like you almost don't need the census.
That's true, but we did fill one out, whatever the most recent one was.
Yeah, 2020, every 10 years.
Yeah. Anywho, moving on to, I knew I had to like include this because
so I'm assuming we both bookmarked the same thing, the pattern booklet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did she say in here that was like the earliest one she's found, like? Or maybe the, like, yeah, I guess the earliest instructions to do this, like printed instructions. So 1950, and I mean this has been done for at least 100 years before that, so it's interesting.
Yeah, she found like other references for creating like what they just call like kind of a pot holder, like block, but not like making it into a quilt. But what's interesting to me here is that we have other, you know, like a Dresden plate, and what we're going to see moving forward is other blocks that people were making in just any old kind of, you know, traditional quilt making way that they then decided to make into a potholder style. You know, like I wouldn't think something like a Dresden plate that's like heavily appliqued to like automatically, I would never think of necessarily like a potholder style for that. But I found that was interesting. And then obviously like we're seeing like this photo here where it's very clear from a farm journal. Again, never a place I'd think to be looking, but obviously it is the place at the time. And Farmer's Wife pattern booklet. Like, yeah, you're not a woman yet, you're just a farmer's wife, but that's another thing. And yeah, the instructions in the last paragraph to bind each block with a strip of bias, then sew all the blocks together with a fine whip stitch.
Good stuff.
Well, and I don't know, why am I such a sucker for, I mean, you are too, for all the old advertising and...
Yeah, it's, you know, it's humbling sometimes to read some of this old advertising and instructions and just whatever.
Like the ad for the most grotesque quilt blocks.
Well, some of that stuff is hilarious, right? Because yeah, they picked the most ridiculous language to describe things, like whatever their marketing team was like. But it's humbling sometimes to think that there's, you know, things that we consider so modern or something like we invented it, you know, this collective we, and then you look at some magazine from 1920 something and they're talking about the very thing, and you're like, oh, this has been around for a really long time, I guess.
That's and often in that different language.
Yeah.
And then I have here the collective photos of the pillow and envelope quilts. I have never come across an envelope quilt. Have you?
I have not, and this is really the only place I've heard of it. Although, I mean, honestly, I'm just kind of digging into some of this ephemera from mid to late 20th century, and I think that's where this little project comes from. The biscuit quilts, or whatever you want to call them, you know, those have been around for a long time. But these envelope, actually, you know, when looking at the envelope quilt, it's kind of cool. You end up with these half square triangles, you know, and I mean the things you can do with half square triangles, right? Like they're almost like a log cabin, depending on the colors you use, how you set them, how you combine them. You could do all kinds of really cool stuff. So it's kind of brilliant when you think about it.
Yeah, and I haven't found it, but my mom had made me one of those like rag quilts that's made as quilt as you go, and then the seam in the middle, like you over butt them together, so you snip all the seam in the middle and it cuts all raggy. The reason I can't find it is because I put it away real good, because she made it all out of flannel and it's quilt as you go, and it's so heavy that some of those seams are already busting.
Oh, just from the weight of picking it up and stuff. Yeah.
Well, that, and remember I told you, I've said a million times, when it comes to quilts, like, I'm a tugger. So yeah, it's funny, we have, like, in all of our antique and vintage quilts, we have like beard guards and stuff. They haven't figured anything out yet to stop you from tugging. You need the toe guard clips that like hold it up or something.
Yep.
And then we couldn't get out of here without your favoriteest one.
Well, real quick before we get to this one, I still am curious to know, like, so the velvet quilt that she says is a waterbed quilt. I remember her talking about this one in her lecture when we hosted her lecture. And I didn't ask her, like, how do you know that this is a waterbed quilt? She had just said, like, it's heavy and it's big. And I guess she knew that it had been made in the 80s. So I guess. Well,
and then she mentions that, does it say on here? Where? She mentioned somewhere that in instructions for quilts like these, that they were recommending to put them on waterbeds.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Because I mean, just looking just the picture, I would have been like, oh, that seems like a very old quilt, because of it's got that almost crazy quilting kind of look to it. But my guess is, as she said, it says velveteen. My guess is it might be some synthetics. So anyway, I just think that's so funny. And when she mentioned that water buds, like the older ones, it was basically a giant sack of water in a frame.
My aunt and uncle had one for a long time.
One of my friends, and I just remember thinking, why would your parents let you get a waterbed? This is the most awful thing I have ever slept in my life.
Yeah, I don't understand the hype of them either, although there was a story about my mom changing my diaper on my aunt and uncle's waterbed, and she instinctively, because I wore cloth diapers, stuck the pin into the waterbed, and he sees it and like freaks out and like, oh my god, let me get the repair kit, don't pull.
Oh no. Yeah. Okay, so my favorite, the Carl Helbusch potholder quilt. I am so curious about this. I wonder, was this the person who made this? And I'm going to go ahead and say it's Carl Helbusch's wife. It's got to be. Because, I mean, where else would a person have gotten this many potholders of Carl's potholders? First of all, I think it's brilliant how she placed them in such a way that the print on the potholders forms this pattern, which I think is really cool. Like, she's really got an eye for this. Plus, the one that she ran short of and had to, like, slip the used one in there. It's in the first column about halfway down. You can tell, yeah, it's a little bit browner and smaller than the others. I think it's also turned the wrong way.
Yeah, you know what I just noticed based on you commenting about that secondary pattern? It's not the same throughout the quilt. See, here you have a completed square and a half here, but then when we get here, it's the completed square and a half here.
Right, because she put the used one in the wrong way. And then I think there's some other ones that are, it's down through there. There's some other ones that are wrong. So that said, I mean, I'm wondering, did this woman like know about potholder quilts? And like, was this like I don't know, I mean, it's probably coincidental. She probably went, what am I going to do with all these potholders, Carl? I'm never going to make enough stuff. I'm never going to cook enough things. Yeah. And then she went, oh hell, I'll make a quilt. It's just fantastic. I gotta say, it's so delightful. and then the attempt, like, so where the little hanging loops come together, then the corners are nice and perfect. But where they don't come together, she obviously tried to do a little weaving.
This right here.
Yes. And I'm kind of like, I think it was just fine to leave the holes,
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's funny because like the I mean this is early, swag,
mhm.
and you can tell it's not like the highest quality swag.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. She's probably like, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do with this crap?" I'm like, "Well, it can keep us warm in the
Mhm.
winter, put it between, your top sheet and like another quilt and hide it in there." And
Yeah.
it could be like, "How did you sleep last night?" "I slept as cozy as an oven mitt." Like,
Well, one other thing that she mentions in here, which I think is really interesting, is page 144, which is this page. Towards the end of that first paragraph there, it says the quilt can be dated after 1963, the year when zip codes were introduced by the U.S. Postal Service.
mm-hmm.
So this is another one of those like dating things. I know sometimes we really struggle with dates, and that's a good one. And actually, one of our dear friends gave me that tip, and it had to do with some ephemera I had. And because the ephemera was stamped with the organization and had their zip code, she said that had to have been printed after 1963. And I was like, how in the world would you know that? And then she told me the zip code thing, and I was like, that's a very cool, like,
Tidbit of info.
yeah, yep.
Probably another one of those like really important dates to add to that date list
Yes.
to keep nearby.
Well, and I thought maybe area codes might be the same way, but area codes were released, I want to say, like in a wave across the United
Mm-hmm.
States. So like I think I think Robin looked it up for us on my stream, and it was 1947 in New Jersey. They started rolling out area codes, like the number that we know today, instead of like, uh Valleydale 697. It's
I
it's like a
remember
number.
when we had to start using area codes for all numbers you dialed and not just long distance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were starting to do that. Oh gosh, was I in college? I think when that happened. But anyway, I know my mom in Virginia. She remembers when they added the area codes. That was in the 50s then when she was little. So it started in 1947, and then it was probably a while before area codes became a thing.
Hmm.
But anyway, it's time when you can like. Janet said maybe an inside joke with her husband. Hey, honey, look what I did with those boxes of pot holders you couldn't get rid of.
Yeah.
Well, and you wonder, like, maybe he got fired or something. Like, maybe he wasn't the World Herald salesman anymore. And what are you going to do with these? Like, you can't give them away if he doesn't have that job anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would really love to know, like, what the story behind it is.
I know you would. No.
And, let's see. Does it say who owns this?
Pam does.
Okay, so she does own it. Okay. So I'm kind of curious, like, can we find the Hellbush family?
Well, I guess you should make a note that this is something you want to ask her about during her interview.
I'm gonna have to. Yeah. Okay. So I think we've talked about the Hellbush quilt quite a bit.
I did not take a photo, I don't think, of this last one. If you had anything you wanted to
the Gammy Elder. Yeah, I didn't make any notes about that one. Although, I mean, it's an interesting one in that it's got all of this broderie purse on it. And I don't know. It's not a super attractive quilt, I'm gonna be honest. So, yeah.
Yeah, it just didn't. This is the one that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
It didn't wow me.
Yeah.
And also because I'm less likely to take photos of quilts that aren't Pam's. So that then brings us into
The
chapter
Ramsey
8.
quilt. Yeah,
Yeah.
in the Ramsey quilt.
So one really, like, leading into Ramsey here on page 147, one thing I felt important to read is the very first paragraph here. where it says quilt
Oh, yeah.
historians vary in their opinions about the rise and fall of quilting in this country. A common belief is that the first revival started in 1876 when the United States Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia featured hundreds of quilts, reviving an interest in colonial crafts. Others recognize only two revivals, one at the beginning of the 20th century when designers offered nature based patterns in a freshened pastel palette, and a second spurred by the US bicentennial in 1976. And another opinion is that the revival has been one long one, ebbing and flowing since the 1870s, stimulated by the arts and crafts movement and the availability of fabrics manufactured in this country. It then stalled during war times while women did other work and grew in popularity after World War II with increased leisure time. Where do you sit on this line?
Yeah, I remember reading this the first time I read the book and then reading it again today and going like, where do I sit on this? So here's what I feel about 1876. In no way do I feel that 1876 is some kind of quilting revival. Now, colonial revival, yes. Absolutely. They're looking back 100 years. 1876 is a big year for all that. But in terms of quilts, oh my God, you cannot swing a cat without hitting a quilt from 1860 or 1880. Anytime we get together with a quilt study group, all of the I mean, like, there are a lot of quilts out there from 1860, 1880. I mean, people were making quilts, you know? And I mean, we were still in a time of ubiquitous quilt making. Now, when you get into the early 20th century, so the 19 teens, the 1920s, I think there is some falling off, particularly World War One. You know, like that definitely is stalling women's crafts. Women did, you know, probably not. It was probably not the same as World War Two. My book won't stay up. You know, women went into factories in World War Two. I do know that World War One, women did go into service of the war effort. I don't think it was as great as World War II. That aside, you know, we do have this time in the 20th century when quilts were not a big deal. You know, coming out of World War II, I mean, you see like in 1940s, 1950s, certainly quilts were being made, but you see like that baby boom time. You know, there's a lot of prosperity and people are like, we don't have to make quilts. We can buy these nice fancy bedspreads and, you know, like decorate the way we want to decorate and, you know, all that kind of thing. So my opinion is this ebb and flow, yes. Early 20th century and then 1976, yes. I'm going to say ebb and flow, but not since the 1870s. I'm going to say ebb and flow since the beginning of the 20th century. That's my opinion. And, you know, it's a slightly educated opinion, but I think there's lots of quilt historians who would say, you don't know what you're talking about, but that's my opinion. So where do you sit on this?
So having like a pollen attack. I don't necessarily sit anywhere really super firm. Because there's a lot of things that I don't know about, haven't looked into, things like that. I do definitely agree that we do have a resurgence in like 1976. I can
For
agree
sure.
with that
Yeah.
wave.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, so when you're talking about World War One, a lot of what my brain goes to in terms of like finding images in my head is have you ever watched the show Mr. Selfridge?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when his staff goes to World War One and things like that, and I'm thinking about what else starts to happen around that time, where we start to get ready-made clothing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure someone's done this. I just haven't read their stuff, but I have a feeling that decline in quilt making probably isn't as sharp as people think that it was. It's the same way that like when we talk about eras in time, you know, medieval era, Renaissance, it's not like, okay, on June 1st of this date,
Yeah.
is now called the Renaissance.
Yeah.
It's just the way that we group eras later on when we start to see things. Um, but I'm really thinking that like the decline in quilt making may have had something to do with the rise in ready-made clothing.
Mhm.
Because if women were making less of their clothing, they might not be using those same skills to make quilts or
Right.
leftover stuff to make quilts. Now, I'm sure some would argue the opposite of like not having to make their clothes frees up their time
Hmm.
to make quilts. But I'm thinking the way that I see it is society found ways to fill their time that
Oh,
had
heck yeah.
nothing to
Yeah.
do with quilt making.
Yes, women, I would say women that were of a higher, higher level of means, wealthy women certainly were finding other things to do with their time. Women that didn't need to sew still had other
Mhm.
stuff they had to do,
Yeah, yeah,
and
they didn't
also,
find this like grand leisure time.
right, and also the other consideration is right there in the 19 teens, you have suffrage as a big deal.
Hmm.
So you've got women that are like, needle and thread is, shackling us. And
Hmm.
so, you've got some pulling away from, sewing
Sure.
for
So I
any
mean,
reason other than have to.
yeah. So there is also those attitudes, the
Yeah.
misogynistic side of things. Like I
Hmm.
think there's a lot more nuance behind a lot of the argument. Like I think Pam did a good job of kind of summarizing
Hmm.
this a little bit about the
Hmm.
different camps. I just haven't read much about what's going on in those periods in terms of putting it into context with
Sure.
this, but
Yeah,
those are
absolutely.
definitely the things that
It's
I
an
think
interesting
about.
thing to think about just based on what you know about history.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I also think from my perspective, it's easy for me, and I mean, I don't think anybody is arguing about 1976 being, because I mean, every woman today who started like sewing, quilting in the 70s cites 1976 and the colonial revival and, the bicentennial as the reason why they got into various types of crafts, including quilting. But I would say that's been in my lifetime. So that's like my frame of reference. And when I think about, specifically like the 1940s, so World War II until 1976, you just have this whole, I mean, this is again my mom and my dad's lifetime, and although quilts were part of their lives then, they were very specific to great grandmothers. And neither of my both of my grandmothers did make quilts, but they were more of like, I want to make a quilt, not like I need to make a
Hmm.
quilt.
Hmm.
And both of them were later in life that they made those quilts. In fact, I would say both of them, it was probably around the 70s. So even though they were, a generation older, they were still being inspired by the 70s. So I think it's safe to say 1940s to 1970s, definitely not nearly as many quilts being made. So yeah.
Mm. The other really just interesting thing on this page 147 um is the mention down here. She just Pam mentions a back to the land movement in the late 1960s created
Mm-hmm.
an interest in old crafts, including quilting. And then she says Jean Ray Lurie published her first book on quilting in 1966 and as editor at Better Homes and Gardens.
Yeah, I knew that and I'd forgotten about it.
I did not know that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know she has kind of like a lot of claim to fame,
Yeah.
but I didn't realize
She's
that
she's got a
that
good
was one of
resume.
them.
Yeah. I would say Jean Ray Laurie and Florence Pito have some of the most intense resumes in terms of like women's craft, quilting, sewing, all that kind of stuff.
And then she mentions like other magazines, Better Homes and Gardens increasing coverage on quilting and patterns. Other magazines followed suit, but more than one author observed a resistance to the craft due to the time it took to make a bed-sized quilt and the amount of space that a quilting frame took. And then perhaps in response, Quilter's Newsletter magazine published a series of articles on Quilt as You Go, with the first appearing in 1972.
And then
So,
Georgia
and then
Bonesteel takes it and
Well,
runs.
well, on the very in the very next paragraph, they're right at the beginning. She says Bonnie Lehman, who started Quilter's Newsletter magazine, um, in her 1972 book, Quick and Easy Quilting, was one of the most was the early one of the most earliest and most comprehensive. And I'm like, we definitely can't discount, other than other things going on in the times in the 70s, like those quilt exhibits and things like that. We definitely can't discount people like a Bonnie Lehman getting those books out, and people picking them up, because that's 1972. So we're already 4 years before 1976. So it's got 4 years to make that much of an impression.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
so I feel like we could have a whole stream just on this.
I know we say the bicentennial, but I also I very much agree. And again, this is the elders in my life. The late 60s was really when it kind of started, and we say the back to the land movement. We're talking about hippies and bohemians, right? And in some cases, people like my mother and the hippies and the bohemians, the only thing they had in common was quilts were good, right? So, moving on to the Ramsey quilt.
Yeah, so this is called the Ramsey Family Quilt, 1971 to 73, made by Betts Ramsey. Cotton 67 by 47. Betts made this add-a-block quilt by binding individually constructed and randomly sized blocks. Each block symbolizes important events or places. This is probably one of the coolest potholder block or quilts that we've seen thus far, because I think it's the only one like this, right?
Mm-hmm. And this one is so cool. And Betts Ramsey is amazing. If you don't know who she's 101. She lives in Tennessee. I don't know if she is still making anything now, but
yeah, I think she is, because she's the one that's donating a quilt to the AQSG auction seminar every year.
Yes, she does. And we have a colleague who goes nuts and buys them all. I'm not 100% though sure those are like ones she has made right then. I think she may have a stockpile that she's letting go.
But I think she makes them specifically for that, if I understand correctly.
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to look at any of them up close and like hold them and examine them. I've only kind of seen them from a distance, but in any event, I think Betts is so creative, and I mean her quilts now are very modern. They're very abstract, and this reminds me a lot of Jean Ray Laurie's. She created kind of the standard of these pictorial sort of quilts when she made the quilt for her son, which would have been about 10 years before this, I think. Actually, it was probably even earlier than that. I want to say Tom's quilt was made in the 50s, I think. In any event, this sort of pictorial aspect of it, I really like it. And in that little, it's right below the mask, I guess. There's like that white mask. It says "Linger Longer." It's so cute.
Do you have any interest in reading this blurb from Betts?
I will. Janet just mentioned 1970 was the first Earth Day. Yep. Foxfire Books, Mother Earth newsletter. My history teacher was supposed to get us ready to take the New York Regents statewide test, but we made paper, a log cabin, rope making. I love that. I think that's so cool. All right, so the story of the Ramsey family quilt. I came to quilt making after 10 years in a career as a textile artist when, in 1971, I took a graduate school seminar on the history of crafts in America. So 1971, I mean, this is right in line with what Janet is saying. My topic was quilt making. During the course, I used Florence Ike's.
Yeah, Ike's.
Yeah, the standard book of quilt making, and taught myself to quilt. I studied the few books available at the time on the processes, techniques, and traditions of quilt making and its history. And I can tell you that is absolutely true. My mother tried to get books out of the library at this time, and she's like, they had one. Among other bits of information, I learned that the quilt makers a century earlier had used a method of joining together small finished blocks to make a whole quilt. This has become known as the potholder technique. Later, Georgia Bonesteel was recognized for this style of quilt as you go through her TV series. I was eager to try anything, and this seemed like a good way to start putting together a quilt. I was already doing applique, so I made an image of my house on a background material, added a piece of outing flannel. I'm assuming is that like a thicker flannel? I'm not
I
sure.
don't know.
So flannel is batting and put a backing to it, turning the edges over to the front as binding. Then I quilted it. I soon learned that flannel did not allow the quilting to stand out as bas relief. I made several other pieces in the same way using regular quilt batting and whipped the edges of the adjoining blocks together on the back. I did not have an overall plan, thinking someday I would have a quilt to cover the bed, but I enjoyed making a block every so often to add to the whole. I incorporated family items, birth states, houses, colleges, sports, travel, hobbies, and pets. The quilt kept growing, and I showed it to some of my friends, including Doris Hoover, a well-known California artist. She said, "Just leave the quilt the way it is, with its irregular sides. It has more interest that way." So leave it I did in 1973, and immediately I had several opportunities to exhibit it in quilt shows in the Southeast, especially at Arrowmont School in Gatlinburg. It has been featured in exhibitions many times since that first outing. That's Ramsey. Um, so yeah, I think it's such a sweet quilt.
And I'm sure if it ever ends up getting to an auction, it's probably going to fetch a decently hefty price.
Yeah, I suspect our friend that snaps her quilts up will probably mortgage her house to get it.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Are these two cutie patooties here on 151?
So
Obviously, like
Wendy Reed, right?
you can, like, it's funny because I can totally, like, I feel like I have seen like a pattern. Like, this actually kind of reminds me almost of like a Dear Jane kind of quilt where you've got like some pretty intense applique going on.
Yeah.
I do have a close up too. That's not what I want to do. There, this one. Yeah, and this one is no bake, no bake applique, 2014 Wendy Reed, Bath, Maine, cotton, 76 by 60, and it's in Pam's collection. Oh my God, look at this squirrel. But so even though like we've still
No, I
got,
don't think these are Wendy still owns these. They say collection of the
oh,
artist.
artist, sorry, I thought it said author.
Yeah.
So while like I can very clearly tell that it's modern based on some of the motifs, we're still making sure that we have some of the older, stuff. Because I mean, Wendy does live in Maine as well.
Yeah, and I think she hits a lot of them. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
the anchor and the horses and the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we've still got like lots of references to water and things like that. Although Bath, Maine, I think is quite a bit. Bath, Maine is closer to one of the small islands. It's right off of one of I forget the name of it. Even though I used to go there, I dated a guy whose parents had a house on that tiny little island next to Bath, Maine. No, wait, maybe I'm thinking of something wrong. I don't know.
I've been to Maine exactly one time. I will go there for the second time ever this year.
Maine, so the one thing
Yeah.
people forget about Maine is it's really big. Like,
Yeah.
I think tip to tip is something like 5 hours or something. It's
Oh,
really
really?
big.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And much more sparsely populated than say like a Massachusetts.
Right.
It's really freaking big. I also got I did do the I have this close up here of this one too. This one is really pretty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like
And
this
these
one.
look like really
Yeah.
really pretty stones on here. And then imagine like you've done this like all potholder style, and then like you're like it's not fancy enough. Let's add like a scallop type edge as well.
Yeah, I love those because you end up with like those little flappies in the corners.
Flappy, that's the technical term. Flappy flappies. Yeah.
Yeah. She's a very beautiful quilter. Her work is very beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And then we have this one on 153. I did not take a photo of the kind of reproduction one
Yeah.
on 152. just because, time, and that quilt is smaller in the photo and
It
things like
says
that.
it's a miniature reproduction. Is that how it was described? Or yeah, replicate in miniature. It's still
Hmm.
like 45 inches by 39 inches. It's still pretty. I mean, it's a wall hanging sized reproduction.
Yeah, so I mean, like some of those blocks, man, were awfully tiny to make. This big one is the Martha Jane Fuller quilt, circa 1840.
That's pretty old for.
Various makers, South Bristol, Maine, cotton, 78 by 67, courtesy of Maine State Museum. So I think there's a potential we could see this quilt when we're in Maine for seminar, and I wouldn't be surprised if we come across it again in our next book. Because I will say that I do know for a fact that there are at least a couple of quilts that cross over. Um, but this one is just, I mean, it's got some spots that are not in the best of shape. Like you can see right here that there's quite a bit of fabric
Well,
loss.
1840. Like,
Yeah, no, I know.
if you were
No,
born in
I was gonna.
1840, you'd have some weird spots too.
Yeah, sorry about my face looking weird. I'm missing some of my fabric. Like,
I was born in 1840.
um, I no, but I was gonna say like I'm sometimes institutions don't have the space, so they can't keep things that aren't like insanely pristine. So I'm glad when there are some things kept that are not insanely pristine, because obviously we know for a fact that potholder quilts, when it comes to quilts, are rare.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I also, this block right here came, it's just really pretty. I did take a close up of some where I got some different lighting so we could really see all this here.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny though, the way that that fabric loss is happening, it actually creates kind of another looking
Yeah.
design.
Yeah, it is kind of cool.
Yeah, sometimes it kind of works for you. But this block right here is really pretty and cheery. And
Mm-hmm.
look at the quilting on that thing. Like that is an awful lot of scrunch.
Yeah, I know. That's got, yeah.
Mm-hmm. She's one of my favorites, I think. I had to get this photo. This is I don't even know what they technically call this room. This is like the back room at the museum.
Oh, okay.
NEQM, and there's like, so if I'm getting my bearings, I think behind him here is the door to like go out to just like the main area. So if this is the sitting the way I think it is, there's a vault behind whoever's taking the photo. And this is kind of, I guess, what you kind of almost call like a quilt resting place. But all
Quilt
of the
resting place.
walls on two of the sides are glass so that people can kind of see that like behind the scenes kind of view. But anyways, I just thought this was cool, this photo. But it says Donald Beld, founded the Fallen Heroes Project to make a block honoring each service person who died in the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. Don speaks to the author about the project as he presents the Fallen Heroes quilt number 4, Nebraska, to the New England Quilt Museum. And since
Yeah.
yesterday was Memorial Day, I found it very fitting that we show this one.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know anything about Donald. Did it say, like, she knows Donald because, yeah, they co-authored Civil War quilts together, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so I didn't know anything about this particular project that he worked on. And it said that the New England Quilt Museum puts on display for Memorial Day and Veterans Day some of these quilts.
If they do, I haven't seen them because I haven't been there. But who knows? Maybe I will walk into one of them tomorrow. And if I
Yeah.
do, I'll report back.
Yeah, take a picture of it if you do.
Yeah, I have not heard about it if that was the plan. And then, of course, I had to get this one because, so the last potholder quilt exhibit was 2023. When did Mary go? I think it's 2023.
It was 2022 or before.
Well, it couldn't have been too much before.
I think
The museum was
okay. Early
so
2023,
2022.
I guess, yeah. It was early 2023, I think.
It was one of those two because I didn't know that she'd also done an exhibit in 2011 because this is not the way the exhibit was set up when Mary came to New England Quilt Museum. And I'm not even sure. Yeah, I guess I recognize most of the quilts in here. But I'm guessing the reason that it was in a different gallery the second time around is because the collection grew.
Ah, okay. So I'm guessing, and I guess maybe this will be a question I will ask Pam, but I'm guessing she started this research and then she had, I guess, had some, so that's why she was able to curate an exhibit. And then she finished the book and the book was released, and so then she did another exhibit. I'm guessing that the
Yeah.
exhibits were in connection with all this
Yeah,
research and book.
you're right. It had to be 2022 because it was probably meant to be 2021 and they couldn't do it. And that's when the book came out, was in 2021. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, because on the one hand, like doing a smaller exhibit with whatever you have at the time is probably she probably got a lot of leads
Mm-hmm.
out of that exhibit. And it's so
Yep.
funny to see the difference. I clearly didn't see this in 2011. None of this was on my radar then. But it's so interesting. This right here, I have yet to see a quilt displayed right here since I've been working at the museum. This is where they have benches.
Oh, so they have
Um,
moved things around. They do some different things since you've started working
yeah,
there.
that and I have never even seen this contraption that they've used to display that.
Hmm.
So
I
definitely
can't really tell what it is that it's displayed
it
on.
just kind of looks almost like what are those balance beams that you do in gymnastics? It
Yeah.
almost because I can see you can see the corner of one right here. It
Mm-hmm.
looks like two balance beams on differing levels
Okay.
that they use to drape.
It's pretty cool. I mean,
I think it's
I
cool
sort
too.
of like it.
I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever seen it like in the basement or anything, so maybe they don't have it anymore.
It's a fun way to display a quilt though, because you do end up seeing all of it, and it's a little bit more like, I guess, accessible. Even though it's roped off, you can kind of still,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was very fun. Um Ooh, my pages are stuck together. And then the last quilt that I got here is this really fancy one. Um, in the end, and this one is Hexagon Quilt 2016, Rhonda Dort, Houston, Texas, cotton silk embellishments. It's only 36 by 36. It looks so much bigger.
It does,
Ron,
but yeah.
Rhonda's hexagon work is centered on recycling vintage textiles that might otherwise be discarded because of damage or staining. And I paid attention to this because I have a collection of handkerchiefs
Yeah, I have a
of
ton of
varying
stuff like
yeah,
this.
varying
Yeah.
kinds because I kind of have a dream of upcycling those into something. And I just thought that this was really, I mean, all the work that she
Mm-hmm.
like put it looks like here she's used some like antique or vintage lace
Yeah, it looks
and
like there's some beading and
yeah,
buttons
she's got
and
ribbon
ribbon
embroidery
embroidery.
here.
Yeah.
This obviously looks like a piece of one of those like towels with a basket on it,
Mm-hmm.
embroidery.
All those colonial needle and Aunt Martha's, they've been around for 100 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of I realized you didn't take a picture of it, but one of my favorites out of this gallery is on page 158, the hanging by a thread
Mm-hmm.
quilt. I thought that one was really cool because I think probably it's the portraits of the quilters. I think that really drew me to it more so than the what it is. But I thought that one
Mm-hmm.
was really neat, how they did that, and they're
Mm-hmm.
very good.
Yeah, I mean some of the portraiture work that people can do, I I can't even fathom. I do like too the one below that, the
Yeah, that one's
butterfly
cute
owl
too.
block.
Butterfly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um,
Oh,
because
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, well, one of the reasons is because Pam made it. When
Oh
confronted
yeah.
with a pile of blocks from vintage quilts, the author chose to make a potholder quilt.
Yeah, and then she did the other one, I guess that's in the project section. I know we're not really looking at that, but is it, am I looking in the right section? Where she took
The red hexagons?
the it's on page 182. She took the embroideries. all of these
Oh,
embroideries. Yeah, and made
mm-hmm.
those too. And I like that too. And I mean, you think about that, what a great thing to do with these, because, you know, I mean, anybody who collects textiles probably ends up with a lot of this kind of stuff.
I have definitely ended up with a lot of it on purpose.
Yeah, and in fact, one of them, let's see, which one is it? I want to say it's the one with the ship. Wherever I go, I know I saw that one pretty recently at an antique store. One thing I forgot to mention about the Ramsey family quilt, it's interesting to me that she's got all of these little, like, I'm sure she was inserting these pieces where she was, you know, I guess she was in her mind thinking, like, I'm going to even this out one day and make it a quilt. But I'm really surprised, like, she didn't put anything in those.
Yeah.
Maybe
like maybe, any embroidery or anything like that.
Yeah, or any piece, or, you know, any applique in there. And I just, and maybe it's, you know, it's the quilting that she's, I mean, there's quilting in there. Like pressing my face against it. But yeah, that kind of surprised me. I was like, oh, that's some lost opportunities there, but it's not my quilt. I didn't make it, so.
Or it could very well be on purpose too.
Yeah.
Well, that ends our discussion, except for the fact that we will have Pam here on next Tuesday, June 3rd at 7 p.m. for our author interview.
And we have lots of questions for her, but we would love to ask her your questions first. So if you guys have any questions for her, send them to quiltnerding@gmail.com or any of the many places you see us online. You know, all the
on
places.
Facebook or Instagram. And we do give, like, she doesn't come in here blind. Like, we do give her some heads up of some of the things we're asking, but don't forget too that you can also ask questions that night live in the chat if conversation sparks your fancy for something that you're thinking about.
Yeah. And we did promise her we're not going to ask her shoe size or her blood type, so, you know. Just kidding.
You're gonna ask her if she likes chicken sandwiches.
So Pam, Coke or Pepsi?
Oh. So okay, so here I was thinking, like, we send her stuff to give her a heads up, and then we're gonna get here on a live, and you are just gonna throw a bomb in her face.
I would never ever do that to a friend of ours. I would do that to, say, Anne or Dawn. Because we've got that kind of relationship with those ladies.
They've really reached the hazing phase of things.
Indeed. Yeah, so.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'm going to go have some dinner and get... Same. Oh my god, this room is so hot. Like, I don't know if you've seen, like, the evolution. It's a wonder my shirt hasn't just slid off. Like, it's that hot.
Got some pit stains there.
It's pretty... And you know what? It's also pretty hot and sweaty because, it's my boyfriend, Dr. Dutton.
Yeah, Dutton does get your... He does cause your blood pressure to rise a little.
Yeah, I got him kind of sweaty.
All right, guys. Well, we look forward to seeing you. Well, if you follow my stream, I'll see you on Thursday. If not, we will see you next Tuesday with Pam in tow. That will be very exciting.
It's going to be very exciting.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, guys.